Good evening, friends. Welcome to one more session on sociology discussion. Sociology discussion related to contemporary issues, current affairs, etc. Now, before we jump into the topic, some of you have asked where is the handout. Handouts have already been distributed. So just check why you have not got it. If you have not got it, and most likely you would have received it. Right? So we have already distributed the handouts. So before we start, some of these announcements, right? In case you need some help related to preparation strategy, if you need any help related to answer writing, all these links are there. And whatever we are discussing right now, it is being recorded and it will be uploaded within 24 hours. And if you need any help related to mentorship, the number is here. So what are we going to discuss today? Right? So we have 5 topics here. And again, these topics are linked with different parts of your sociology paper 1 and paper 2. Some of them are linked with paper 1, more theoretical. Some of them are linked with paper 2, right? It's more again India-based. So I'll just give you a brief overview of the topics before we take up each of these topics. The first topic, crimes against women in Indian metropolitan cities. Right? So what we are going to discuss is, there was a recent article in EPW, and they have analyzed the National Crime Records Bureau data. They have looked at census data, multiple data points they have taken up, and they have analyzed what is the extent of crimes in metropolitan cities. Metropolitan cities are those cities where the population is more than 10 lakh, right, as per their definition. Right? So what are some of the trends we will try to understand? Now, keep one thing in mind. This particular discussion that we have, the first topic, we are going to cover different kinds of data points and trends. Right? So that is the major aim here. And these data points and trends can be useful for you from the perspective of sociology paper 2. In sociology paper 2, if you look at the last chapter that you have, right, it has crisis of development and other things. It has one topic related to atrocities against women. Right? So in case there is any question related to that part of the syllabus, you can always use the data points that we are going to talk about today. We're not going to talk about any grand theories here, by the way. When we have the first discussion, it will be more about data and some interesting trends. The next topic is development and conflicts. Right? So whenever you have development, multiple things change. But it is not always an easy ride. Right? The process of development, you will find different kind of challenges. So what happens? What is development? What is the process of development? What all entails the process of development? And sometimes you have conflicts because of development or in the process of development. Why do you have these conflicts? What are the reasons for these conflicts? And is there any way by which these conflicts can be resolved? We'll try to look at some of these things. Also, we'll refer to certain case studies. Right? In case of India, certain kind of development projects were planned, and maybe these development projects could not fructify because of the conflict that emerged. Because in some cases, these projects were, again, the projects were carried out, but over a period of time, again, the benefits that were supposed to be accrued hasn't been accrued, and it has ensured different kind of conflicts. So we'll look at that. And there's also something which was there in EPW. EPW had a book review, and this book review talked about this. And how is this relevant? Again, paper 2, the last part, it has one topic on conflicts and development. Right? So from that perspective, it is relevant. The next topic that we're going to talk about, decentralization, development, and elite capture. So decentralization and elite capture. These two things, again, are linked with paper 2 as well as paper 1. Right? In paper 1, you have topics related to politics, right? Society and politics. In paper 2 also, you have topics related to society and politics. Now, what is the meaning of decentralization? You would have heard the term centralization, but there is another term, decentralization. Right? In centralization, what happens? You have a lot of power at the center. Few people at the top, they hold on to the power. They are the ones who are deciding everything. Right? They take all the decisions. Decentralization is opposite of that. Giving up power at the center level to other agents. That is decentralization. So if you look at India's political system, we are trying to go for decentralization. Right? For example, in the 1990s, the Panchayati Raj institutions, the urban local bodies, all these things got a constitutional mandate. Right? So 73rd, 74th Constitutional Amendment Act. So previously, maybe you had 2 tiers of government. Now, as per the constitution, you will have 3 tiers of government. So more powers, instead of being at the center, are being gradually distributed. At least that's what was the stated objective. But what is happening, or what might be happening, is elite capture. What is elite capture? Who are the elites? Like, elites are certain kind of influential people. They are the elites. They might have different kinds of capital, as a result of which they are so influential. So the aim of decentralization was to ensure that people who are marginalized, they also participate in the political processes. They also have a say in the policy making process. But what we are observing is elite capture. Even though we are moving ahead, we are going towards decentralization, you will find elites who are influencing these processes, who are still as powerful. The marginalized communities might not have what they say. Both these terms, decentralization and elite capture, they're linked with both paper 1 and paper 2. And what we will do is we'll look at some of the major developmental programs that the government has taken up from 1950 onwards, and how elite capture has happened in these programs. These programs, right, they were supposed to ensure decentralization, more power to the people, but that might not have happened. The next topic is crime during pandemic. So from 2020 onwards, and in fact it's going on till now, we are dealing with a pandemic. Right? COVID-19 outbreak happened in 2020 or 2019, end of 2019. In India, we had the first case in January 2020. So at this point of time, when the world is dealing with the pandemic, how have different kind of crimes emerged? Maybe in some cases, some kind of crimes might have also gone down. So if you have to understand the profile of crimes, right, this is something that is going to be interesting. Now, how is this linked with whatever syllabus that you have? So in your syllabus, there is a topic called as deviance. Right? Crime and deviance, they're part of our syllabus. Paper 1. Right? Merton talks about deviance. So sometimes what they do is they will ask you some application-based questions. Right? Merton will have different kinds of deviance theories. But what they will try to look at, they might give you a question related to deviance, and they will ask, okay, during the last 2 years of the pandemic, how have the crime rates changed? Or how the socio-economic profile of crimes have changed? Right? So in those scenarios, you have to, again, answer questions. You have to analyze things. So these kind of analysis can be important. The last topic, structure agency debate. See, this is one of the most fundamental debates in sociology. What is this debate about? So main debate here is, which of these two, structure or agency, has a larger role to play? So some group of thinkers, some sociologists will say that yes, there exist certain social institutions, there exist certain social structures. They have a constraining impact on the individual. While some other sociologists, in fact the later sociologists, what they have been saying, they are saying that individuals, they have their own capacity to act, they have their own agency. Right? So whether society constrains individuals or whether individuals have their own say and they change the society, that debate is going on forever. So this is what is referred to as the structural agency debate, and we will take it up. There are certain midways as well, right? We are going to take it up, right? What are those midways? How the question can be reframed? So this is one of those fundamental questions out there. Again, it is part of research methodology, maybe it is part of positivism, non-positivism, all those areas. So this is again one of the fundamental things, can be asked at any point of time, right? It's kind of an evergreen question. Can be asked as a compulsory question, can be asked as those 10 marker questions, which are part of those option questions, choice-based questions. So these are the things that we are going to take up in the next 2 hours, right? So let's get started with the first topic: crime against women in India in metropolitan cities. Right, so before you ask me, right, why are you focusing on crime against women? Why are you focusing on crime against women in metropolitan cities? Right now, again, I don't have an answer to this question. Why I am focusing on this? Why I am talking about this topic is this was something which was there in the news. There was a recent study by EPW, and on that basis we are talking about it. But keep in mind that whatever we are going to discuss, right, it will help us get some trends, right? It will help us get some data which might be useful answer writing. If you're asking me why we are talking about crimes against women, this is something which is extremely important. We need to talk about it. We need to understand it, not only from the perspective of the exam, but also as citizens of this society, right? We need to understand these kind of dynamics, right? If you look at the Indian society, Professor Veena Das, sociologist Veena Das, talks about certain things. Yeah. She says that in case of Indian society, women are revered, right? They are worshipped. Right? If you look at, for example, the Hindu society, you have so many female goddesses. So we would assume that the status of women in the Indian society is good. But is that correct? That might not be correct. Though women are given a very high social status, I mean, as per our customs, rituals, etc. But at the same time, different kind of discrimination can be there against women. Women face different kind of atrocities. So here you will find a very peculiar thing. What is happening here is, Professor Veena Das says, in case of India, we have this Devi-Dasi dichotomy. What is the meaning of this? In the society, women are given respect, they are revered, right? In some cases. So some women are treated as Devi, goddesses. But at the same time, women are meted, different kinds of inferior treatment is also meted out to women. They are treated as Dasi. So if you have to understand it, in our society, there are different kinds of norms. If women are fulfilling these norms, they might be worshipped. But if they are not fulfilling these kind of norms, whatever societal norms are there, they might be given these kind of treatment. Right? So, and again, the kind of treatment meted out to women can vary. Right? It can be extremely inhuman as well. So different kinds of crimes are also committed against women. So that's the reason understanding the type of crimes becomes important. So let's get started. What we are trying to do here, right? What is the purpose of this entire discussion? And what we're trying to do is, in urban areas, different kinds of urban areas are there. There are smaller cities, there are towns, there are metropolitan cities. How does the crime profile look like? This actually gives you an idea that crimes against women, it is not uniform throughout. In some places, the crimes can be more. In some places, the crimes can be less. Again, the nature of the crimes can also vary. So what we are trying to imply is, in different geographies, the crime rates can vary. It's not uniform throughout. Certain geography, you will have more crimes. Certain geographies, you will have less crimes. And that is what they are trying to analyze. They are looking at different metropolitan cities, cities which have more than 10 lakh population. Right? Again, here also there is variation. Some cities will have population more than 50 lakh. Some cities will have population more than 1 crore. Right? So in different kind of these cities, what is the crime rate? What is the crime rate against women? Now, there are different kind of crimes. Crimes can be broadly classified as crimes against persons, crimes against property, crimes against legal authority, crime against local rules. Right? So for example, in a particular area, there can be certain rules, regulations. If you are violating those rules, regulations, it is crime against local rules. In some cases, there can be crime against property. You are destroying the property, maybe. Right? So that is a crime against property. Crime against persons. For example, a female is, she is facing sexual assault. There were some people who committed some form of sexual assault against a female. That is crime against persons. If there is someone from the scheduled caste community and untouchability is being practiced against this person who is from the scheduled caste community, that is crime against a person. So broadly, crimes can be divided into different types. And what we are going to discuss is crime against persons. Right? We are basically talking about crime against women. And we are trying to understand the geographical dimension of the crime. How in different kinds of geography, the crime rates, the number of crimes are varied. Now, how do you define crimes against women? What are those crimes which qualify as crimes against women? So we have a United Nations definition. Any act of gender-based violence that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, psychological harm or suffering to women, including threats of such acts, coercion, arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or in private life. So just look at this definition. There can be crimes which are happening in public. There can be crimes which can happen in private life. For example, within the household. Within the household also, women can be different kinds of crimes can be committed against women. Like for example, dowry-related acts, which usually happen within the household, within the confines of the household. This is happening in private life. Domestic violence, again, this is something that is happening within the confines of the household, private life. Rape, again, can happen in private life, can happen in public life as well. Right? In outside also this can happen. So both of these things will qualify as crime. Now, crime includes things which can result in these kind of harm, or even if someone is threatening someone, there is a threat of these kind of acts, there is coercion, there is deprivation of liberty. All these things are considered as crimes against women. Right? So this is kind of a very holistic definition of what crimes against women implies. But the study that we are going to refer to, they are not including all the different kinds of crimes against women. They are restricting themselves to 5 selected crimes: right? Acid attacks, dowry deaths, sexual assault, rape, and attempt to commit rape. So these are few kind of crimes they are restricting, and again, they're studying these crimes. For each city, they're studying these crimes, and they're comparing cities on the basis of these crimes. Right? So maybe they could have included more data. In that case, again, for all cities, they would have to include these data. But they have taken 5 data points, and they're comparing cities on the basis of these 5 data points. And it is based on 2011 census. Now, what are their findings? The first thing, they're just looking at the crime scenario. So we're not talking about crimes against women here. We are just talking about overall what is the crime scenario in India, right? We'll go to crimes against women, but just the crime scenario first of all. We find out that metropolitan cities have higher share in the total crime incidents. The number of criminal activities that are conducted. Metropolitan cities have a large number of these criminal activities. I'm talking about numbers, right? Overall, absolute numbers is large. But I'm not talking about the crime rate. Crime rate means number of crimes committed by the population, divided by the population, right? So it's a ratio. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about the number of crimes. So number of crimes increase with the increase in the size of the city. Larger cities tend to have more number of crimes. But what is interesting is smaller metropolitan cities are having a higher crime rate as compared to large metropolitan cities. Crime rate means number of crimes committed by population. So if you compare different metropolitan cities, some will have population greater than 1 crore, some will have population greater than 50 lakhs, some will have population greater than 10 lakhs. So the larger metropolitan cities, crime rate is comparatively less as compared to smaller metropolitan cities. This is what they are finding out. Now, Delhi is one of those cities which has large number of crimes, and again, criminal crime rate is also quite large. So it's kind of an exception. In Delhi, of the total number of crimes, 25% of the crimes which are recorded in metropolitan areas are recorded in Delhi. And among all the metropolitan cities, Delhi's population is 10.5%, around 10%. So population is 10% of all metropolitan cities, but if you take the number of crimes, it has 25% of those crimes. Right? So Delhi, again, sometimes you will hear these terms, right? Delhi is the crime capital and other things. This analysis also points to that. Right? They have comparatively less population, but high amount of crime rates. Apart from that, other mega cities that you have, right? If you arrange cities in terms of population, the other 7 cities, the crime numbers and all is comparatively less, right? Their crime rate is less than the average crime rate among 53 mega cities. So there's something which is interesting. Delhi has large number of crimes, but the larger cities are not having that much number of crimes except for Delhi. The smaller cities, smaller metropolitan cities, they have a high criminal rate. Now let's move to crimes against women. These are some graphs which was there in EPW, is there in your handout as well. Again, I don't need to explain it because more or less similar. Whatever I just explained, it is reflected here. Crimes against women. What is the finding? Number of crimes increases with increase in city size. As you have larger cities, the number of crimes against women is also increasing. Also, keep in mind, it is the absolute number of crimes. We are not talking about crime rate, total crimes, right? If a city has like 10,000 population and if a city has 1 lakh population, so the city which has 1 lakh population is most likely having more number of crimes. Cities with high incidence of crime also have a high number of crimes against women. Basically, if overall crimes are high, crimes against women is also high. Those cities which have less number of crimes, overall crimes, they have less number of crimes against women. Rate of crime, they did not find any relation with the size of the city. In the previous case, you found out that the smaller metropolitan cities have high rate of crime. But here, they're not finding any of those relation. Rate of crimes and number of crimes, rate of crimes against women and size of city, there is not much linkage. Apart from that, some numbers they have 3.32% of the total crimes against, if you look at all the total number of crimes, 3.32% of those crimes in metropolitan cities are against women. Now, let's look at the nature of crimes. What kind of crimes are committed against women? And again, is there any trend here? Acid attacks. These are some of the crimes which are committed against women. And again, you will find these instances quite frequently. Now, we find out that in Delhi, the number of acid attacks is quite high. Of all the acid attacks that has happened as per their data, as in these metropolitan cities, almost half of them have happened in Delhi. 19 out of 41 cases in all metropolitan cities happened in Delhi. If you look at dowry deaths, now also there is prevalence of dowry, and now also you will find instances where brides are burnt because they have not fulfilled some of the requirements, some of the demands. Right? So dowry deaths, now also it happens. Some people say that okay, these are things which used to happen in rural India. That might not be true. In urban areas also these kind of things happen even now. So when it comes to dowry deaths, here also Delhi has quite high number of dowry deaths. So they found out that there were some 689 dowry deaths in metropolitan cities, 100 of which were reported in Delhi. And the next city was again Patna. And they tried to look at the geography, right? Metropolitan cities in map, and where are these kind of cases happening? They find out that cities along the Ganga Yamuna plain, right? That the northern parts of India, these are the places where incidents of dowry related deaths are quite high, which points to the fact that okay, dowry is being exchanged. Women are extremely vulnerable in these societies, and again, the law enforcement mechanism is also not good enough, right? So which is not able to prevent this. So position of women, law enforcement capacity, all these things, it is an indicator of that. And they also find out that there is a distinct difference between North India and South India. Northern parts of India, these kind of crimes are quite high. Southern Indian cities have relatively less incidents of this. Right? So again, data points to that. So North-South divide is there when it comes to dowry-related deaths. Sexual assaults. Jodhpur, Aurangabad, Delhi, they have very high rate of sexual assaults. And here also, there is a North-South divide. So northern parts of India, the incidents of sexual assaults were comparatively more. Southern parts of India, the incidents of sexual assaults were comparatively less. It's not that in southern part of India there is no sexual assault. There also it is happening, but there is a difference between them. The rates are different. Okay, rapes, Delhi had a huge number of incidents. Of all the total number of rapes that have happened in India, 30% of that has happened in Delhi. And also, keep in mind, of all the metropolitan cities, right, Delhi's population share is hardly 10%. 10% is the population share, but the number of incidents of rape is 30%. Right, so again, maybe it is linked with the social structures, maybe it is linked with law enforcement capacity here. So this is how the different kinds of crimes against women look like as per the data. Now, another way to analyze this, look at different regions, right, different states, how the crime rates vary in different states. So what they have done is, they look at what is called as the crime population ratio. Now, what is crime population ratio? So they're basically taking two numbers here. One is percentage of crimes of the state by percentage of population. That means, let's say there's a metropolitan area, metropolitan city in a particular state, and let's say in the state there are 100 crimes happening. The metropolitan city has 10 crimes, right? So 10%, 10 out of 100. Let's say the population of that area, population of that state is 200, and that metropolitan city has, let's say, 40% of the population. So 40 by 200 you're going to do, right? So 20%. So the crime population ratio will be 10 by 20. So percentage of crime by percentage of population, that is what they are trying to measure. So if the crime population ratio is more than 1, what does it point out? It points to the fact that large proportion of crime is happening in the metropolitan areas as compared to the other places. If the crime population ratio is less than 1, it points to the fact that in the other areas, the villages, the towns, the smaller cities, smaller towns, the crime proportion is comparatively more. Right? So the crime population ratio is percentage of crimes by percentage of population. And how are you computing the percentage? With respect to the state. So crime population ratio below 1 indicates crimes against women are concentrated either in villages or in smaller urban areas, while metropolitan cities are comparatively safe. Now, what does the data point out? They find out that in South Indian states, you have a low crime population ratio. Exception is Karnataka, where Bangalore has comparatively high crime population ratio. North Indian states, the crime population ratio is above 1, which implies that in the North Indian states, in the metropolitan areas, the proportion of crime is quite high. Patna again has just 1.15% of the population, and the crimes are almost 3 times of that. Right? So again, disproportionately high number of crimes against women in Patna as per this data point. Right? So this is how it looks like. If the crime population ratio is less than 1, the metropolitan cities are safe in these places. If the crime population ratio is greater than 1, again, the metropolitan cities have high amount of crime. If it is greater than 2, again, the number of crimes happening in these metropolitan cities is dramatically high as compared to the rest of the state. So this is what they find out. Now, what are the larger questions out of it? Right? What are some of the broader questions out of it? See, in urban areas, you have different kind of social problems. We found out that in some urban areas, the larger metropolitan cities, the crimes against women and all these things are comparatively less. But in the smaller metropolitan cities, the crimes against women is quite high. In the future, again, the level of urbanization is going to increase. Small towns will become cities. Rural areas will become towns. So multiple kinds of social problems might emerge. Crimes against women is one of those social problems. So the governments, both union government, state government, and also the local governments, right, urban local bodies, they need to focus on these kind of things, right? The new kind of social problems that are emerging. Next thing is, see, different kinds of urban development programs have been initiated, right? Smart cities and other things. But many times, questions are raised whether social problems in urban areas are being resolved or not, have been resolved or not. Something like smart cities, is it addressing these kind of emerging social problems, right? Time and again, these questions are raised. What is the capacity, what is the capability of solving some of these problems? On top of that, there are certain kinds of trends in recent times, or certain kind of activities, actions, which point out that maybe the state, the governments are not really interested in solving these problems. One example this particular paper points out, they're saying that traditionally, the National Crime Records Bureau used to publish the crime data of all metropolitan cities across the country. But recently, the data is only confined to some selected cities, right, which have population greater than 20 lakhs. Now, if you have to solve any problem, the first thing is you have to understand the problem. You have to measure the problem, extent of the problem. You need to have data about that problem. But if you do not have enough data about that problem, if you have not measured something, how will you solve the problem? Just think of it like this. I'm giving you a parallel example. If I have to address the problem of poverty, first thing that I have to do is find out what is the extent of poverty. How many people are below poverty line? What is the meaning of poverty? Then only I can take steps, right? So you need to have idea about the magnitude of the problem. If you don't know what is the extent of the problem, if you don't know about the magnitude of the problem, how are you going to solve it? And that is the problem here. Right? You need to have enough data. And if you are moving in the opposite direction, ideally what should be the case? You should have more and more data about things, right? You should have data at even granular levels. But in the past, if you had data about all cities and now you are restricting yourself to only certain cities which have population greater than 20 lakhs, you are possibly moving in the opposite direction. Also, as part of sustainable development goals, one of the sustainable development goals is to have safer cities. And safe cities means cities which are safe for children, for different communities, which also includes cities which are safe for women. So if you have to meet the sustainable developmental goal target, then we have to create cities which are safer for women. And so it should be one of the key focus here. We have to understand which are the crime hotspots. We need to have awareness about different crime-prone areas. There can be certain areas in cities where prevalence of crime is quite high. And so all these things should be the focus of governmental interventions. It should be the focus of public policy. So this is what is the thing that union governments, state governments, urban local bodies should be focusing on when it comes to women, crimes against women and atrocities. So this is about crime against women in metropolitan cities. Now there is one question here. What is Devi-Dasi dichotomy? Analyze it in the context of increasing crimes against women in Indian metropolitan cities. Right? This is something that you have to write in 200 words. So how will you answer this question? First of all, there are two parts to this question. Right? The first part is about the Devi-Dasi dichotomy. Second part is about Indian metropolitan cities and the crime rates. Now, Devi-Dasi dichotomy, already I talked about it. In case of India, you will have certain kinds of social norms. If women are adhering to these norms, if women are fulfilling these norms, they will be revered. They might even be worshipped. Talk about all these instances, right? How women are worshipped in Indian society. In fact, within the household also, women are expected to carry out different roles. If women are carrying out those roles, right, so they will be considered to be pious and other things. But if females start demanding their own rights, which they should get, in that case, they will be questioned, right? So they will be not given the right kind of treatment. They will not be treated as equal human beings. One of the common observations, like usually, you will have different studies which point this out, and again, anecdotal evidence will also be there. Usually within households, are resources equally distributed? Most likely not. Whenever there is any food item, usually the other members, they eat it first, and usually the female members will be eating it at the end. Most likely all the meals women eat at the end. But isn't it her right to also have equal share of the food? If she's doing that, again, questions might be raised, right? How come she's eating first, or how come she's eating at the same point of time? So usually that happens, that women will be eating at the end, and by the time they're having their meal, right, not enough of different items will be left, and as a result of which they might not have a balanced diet, and which again can lead to different kind of issues. So if they start demanding those rights, again, questions will be raised. How can you do this? Right, so you can talk about these instances. You can talk about, you can refer to the section on kinship, right? Society and kinships from paper 1, also paper 2. Link all these points together. So for the first part, you can mention this. Second part, analyze it in the context of increasing crimes against women. So again, you can talk about how in urban areas, right? Ideally, urban areas are those areas, metropolitan areas are those areas where you would expect people to be more open, people to be more liberal, the social norms to be better, right? These are the places where you will expect modernity, then more education, more educated population, more aware population, people working in white collar jobs, etc. But despite that, you will find different kinds of crimes against women, especially in these crime rates, especially high in smaller metropolitan cities. And so those things you can point out. We can talk about how along the Ganga Yamuna plain, the these rates are quite high. So all these points you can talk about, and you can have a well knit, coherent answer. Right? So maybe 100 words on the first part and 100 words on the second part, or maybe it can be split in 80, 120 as well. So these are the things that you can talk about in this answer. So now let's move to the next bit: development and conflicts. Manala asks that this is only reason of migration, or are there anything? Hey, migration is not. This is not the reason for migration. I think last time we had a detailed discussion on migration, right? What all factors lead to migration, internal migration, and other things. Right? So I don't think this is an important factor for migration. People migrate for a host of other reasons, right? We saw women in India mostly migrate with their family. Women in India mostly migrate because when they get married, they're getting married, and we usually have the petty local setups, right? After marriage, usually the brides will move to the husband's place. And for men, the reason for migration is getting work and other things. So again, migration is something which is slightly different from this. The reasons for migration are slightly different. Varsha Bahar says, why is that? Again, this is a societal norm. Why is it? We can't say why is it. What do we know? What is it? Right? So that is more important. What is it is more important as compared to why is it. Now, if you try to analyze it, maybe it has got something to do with historical norms and other things, right? How is people's behavior shaped? Right? What kind of culture you had? What kind of customs you had? Historically, what all have happened? So maybe some reason is over there. But again, it's very difficult to pinpoint why this has happened. But what happens? It is easy to explain. Sher asks coercion and arbitrary deprivation. What is coercion? Different kinds of force. If it is applied on someone, that is called coercion. If people want to, if a female wants to, if there is some kind of force imposed on a female, right? She would have, and as a result of which she is acting in a particular manner. She would not have necessarily acted in a particular manner, but she is now forced to act in a particular manner. That is called coercion. I can give you an example of this. Let's say there is someone who is stalking that female, right? And as a result of which, the female is now stalking someone, just following her all the time, trying to find out which route she's taking up, what she's doing all the time. This is something which can impact the female's mobility now, right? She might now decide that, okay, she might feel panicky, she might feel anxious, she might be afraid that something might happen, because why all of a sudden this guy is following me? So she might now change her behavior, she might not even step out, or she might keep on changing her routes all the time. So this kind of a coercion. Someone has forced this person, or forced this female, and her behavior is not changing. Arbitrary deprivation. See, what is deprivation? You are denying someone some rights. That is deprivation, right? So sometimes deprivation can be on the basis of some rationale, but if it is random, right, it is called arbitrary deprivation. So, for example, if females are ideally, right, females should have equal access as males, right? They should have equal access to different public spaces, different kind of things. But if they are deprived of all these things, they cannot access public spaces because there's a fear that a particular kind of atrocity can be committed against them. They're afraid of going out at night. That's usually the case, right? Men can go out at the night, they can venture out even at 12 o'clock, 1 a.m. But females might not do that because there is always this inherent fear that, okay, things might go wrong. So ideally, what should be the case? Any individual, irrespective of his or her gender, should be able to step out at any point of time. But usually what will happen, male members can do that, but female members cannot do that. This is what, again, male privilege is all about. So this is an arbitrary kind of deprivation of right, the restriction on mobility of an individual. Pooja asks, please explain the Devi Dasi part. Okay, I just repeat it. What is Devi here? Devi means goddess. There are so many festivals in India. There are so many festivals where female goddesses are worshipped. And again, there will be so many temples for female goddesses, right? Lakshmi, Saraswati, so many female goddesses are there. So what Veena Das, Professor Sociologist Veena Das is saying, women in India are sometimes treated as Devi, they're treated as goddess. But at the same time, females are also treated as Dasi, right? They're treated like a slave, maybe. Inferior treatment is being meted out to them. Now, what is the meaning here? At some instances, right, if women are fulfilling certain roles which is ascribed to them, they will be said to be goddesses. For example, if females are sacrificing for the family, they are not eating so that the other members of the family can eat things if there are limited resources, then it will be said, okay, this female is so good, she's sacrificing, she's always taking care of others, and she will be treated as a goddess. Okay, she's the best. But if she demands whatever is her right, she also has access to the resources within the family, right? She also has equal rights to all those things. If she demands that, again, people will start questioning, how come you are demanding all these things? Women are supposed to sacrifice for others. So these kind of patriarchal norms can be there. These are all part of our culture customs. So in that case, you will be treated as a dasi. So this is the meaning of that dichotomy. Vivek Yadav says, what could be the flaw in social structure in North India which leads to such crimes against women? Maybe it can be a flaw in North India, or maybe it can also be something which has happened in southern parts of India, right? Education, awareness, the kind of societies that you have in southern India. For example, in some places in southern India, you have matrilineal societies, you have matriarchal societies. So women have a greater say. Look at what kind of marriages happen in southern India, right? In northern parts of India, you have extensive kinship ties, right? You have Gotra exogamy, you have village exogamy, all those things, extensive kinship ties are there. So whenever a female is getting married to someone, that female is a complete stranger. I mean, the female is a complete stranger in the family. So she's always vulnerable. But in southern parts of India, those things are not there. Right? Generally, females get married into families which are known to each other. Maybe all these things ensures that the position of women is not as vulnerable. And again, all these things has a bearing on other things, education, attainment, and taking up different kinds of professions. So as a result of which, again, the position of women in southern India might be better as compared to the position of women in northern India. Again, these are all different ways. It's not that you can pinpoint, oh, this is the only reason why things in North India are worse as compared to things in southern India. So let's move to the next topic: development and conflicts. Now, before we start discussing on this, I just want you to think, what is development? Right, just think about it. What is development? And you can put it in the chat box. What is the meaning of development? Right? You can just type it here in the chat box. What do you think is development? See, I can see a lot of people here, and I expect you to just type what is the meaning of development accordingly. How do you visualize development? Then says social growth, security, socio-economic. So when I say socio-economic development is development, isn't it? I mean, you are using the term development to explain development, right? Anything else? I mean, try to think, try to increase your horizon here rather. Improvement in society, better lifestyle, as Varsha says. Things are easy. If you have development, then things are easy. Yeah, exactly right. If there is socio-economic development, you have multiple options. It is easy to get things done. Nagarjun says improvement, something more advanced. Okay, that's also interesting. Development means progress. Shane Sojia says improvement in all aspects of life. Ashok says. Rajesh says development is economic growth. Manala says economic growth. Right? Yeah, I mean, so broadly we have covered different aspects here. Many of you, what you are saying is it is some form of a progress. It is some form of an advancement. It is way by which whatever is the present situation, the new situation becomes better. Right? Life becomes easier, as some of you pointed out. Some of you have talked about economic growth. See, growth and development, there's a slight difference. Growth means something which is quantitative. Some numbers have changed. Right? If I'm saying India's economy is growing, that means maybe our GDP is growing at 8%, right? Which is not the case. But yeah, one example, or our per capita incomes are increasing. So those numbers that you have, and that tells you about growth. So it is quantitative. While development is slightly broader, it is qualitative. Quality of life. Quality of life has improved. Development means quality of life might change, might improve. So development is slightly broader than economic growth. But yes, economic growth is important for development. If you are not having economic growth, you will not have development. But if economic growth is there, it does not necessarily imply development will be there. Right? So economic growth is one of the prerequisites for development. But economic growth does not necessarily imply development will happen. Right? So there are two different concepts. Maybe the economy is growing at a very fast pace, but it might so happen that people's life is not changing. Maybe only few people are there who are getting benefited, others are not getting benefited. So in that case, the quality of life, standard of living of large section of the population has not changed. Right? So for them, development has not happened. But for the entire society, for the entire economy, growth has happened. Right? So these two terms are slightly different since two of our friends pointed this out. So I just want to highlight it. Now the question is, if there is development, or if you are trying to have development, why will there be conflict? Right? How development and conflicts, they're intrinsically linked with one another. So you are trying to have economic development, and you are trying to have different kind of developmental projects, which can possibly make life easier. You have, let's say, better water supply. You will have greater economic activity. You will have malls. You will have different kinds of manufacturing setups, different kind of firms, different kind of organizations. All these organizations forms, they will create jobs. They will add value to the economy. They will create goods and services which will make your lives easier. But why do you think there can be a conflict when you go for these kind of development projects? So this is what we are going to understand in the next 20 minutes or so. Right? So let's get into the topic. So first thing, what is development? Now we are looking at the traditional definition here of development. Development is a stage in which, with the help of knowledge and skill, man is able to relieve himself from the natural environment and mold it for its own advantage. So what is happening here? So with the help of skills, with the help of knowledge, man is able to change the environment. And he is trying to create goods and services from the environment, which is going to possibly improve his living standards, which will basically make his life easier, as some of you pointed out. This is what development is. You're using different kind of natural resources to improve your living standards. So you're using skills, you're using knowledge. You're using all these things so that you can mold nature for your own advantage. But in this process, what happens? What are some of the inherent components of this process? Usually what happens, you will extract different kinds of minerals. Right now, as I'm discussing with you, right, I'm using a laptop, maybe I have a phone with me. How all these devices would have been created? You require different kinds of minerals for creating these devices as well. Semiconductors and other things, how they are created, you need different kinds of minerals for it. Rare earths and other things. And again, for our basic requirements, right, for our food, for the transportation of our food, for our commuting, for all these things, you need natural resources, you need fuel, you need oil. So development will definitely involve extraction of different kinds of natural minerals. How will you extract these minerals? You will extract it from different mines, right? It will also involve controlling the flow of water, generation of water. So you, for example, if you need power, different ways power can be created. One of the ways through different kinds of hydroelectric projects. So you need to control that. And not only this, I mean, this is the example that I gave you is for power, but again, for our daily requirement, we need water. How do you get that water? Right? You are somehow trying to alter the sources of water. Maybe you are extracting it from the groundwater sources. Maybe you are getting it from the river, the different kinds of pipelines that are there. It also involves transforming land. Different kinds of projects. For example, let's say you want to have better commuting facilities, right? You need to have highways. When is the highways being constructed? On roads, on land, right? So you have to transform land as well. Previously, the land was covered with forest. Now you're constructing highways through that. If you want to have energy, another option is set up different thermal power plants. So here again, the land use will be changed. If you want to create more jobs, again, you have to create factories. You have to create other kind of setups. For that also, you will need land. So for development, you have to extract different kinds of natural minerals. You have to control the flow of water. You have to transform land. So without all these things, development is difficult. Right? Usually, development will involve this process. But how come all these things lead to conflict? See, whenever you are trying to do all these things, it can lead to multiple kind of conflicts, right? Those who are the original inhabitants of this land, they might be at the receiving end, right? They might have to be removed from the land. They might not be provided adequate compensation. So all these challenges can emerge, right? So we'll see that, what all issues can emerge. Before that, let's see what are some of the characteristics of development. Each point we'll take up one by one. With development, the natural environment that you have, it is converted so that it will be for the advantage of the human beings, right? For example, there is a forest over there, right? Now, what you are trying to do, you are trying to create a road through it or a highway through it so that people can easily commute through the forest. So you are using it, you are doing it for the advantage of human. It also leads to use of different kind of technological and economic capabilities. It can lead to increase in physical and economic capabilities. So whenever there is development, the physical and economic capabilities also increase. Like for example, if you have development, which also implies you have technological advancements, which also implies your capacity to do things will change. I'll give you an example. Let's say 40, 50 years back, right? You did not have different kinds of machinery. Everything was being carried out. It was being carried out by manual laborers. But with development, you now have different kind of tools. So your physical capacity, economic capability, all these things have increased. Look at the agricultural sector, right? Everything was possibly being done by manual laborers. But now you have different kind of machinery which can carry out the same thing. So previously something which required maybe 5 man days. Now the same thing can be done by machine and you don't even, just one person can do it, and that too within a matter of hours. So with development, physical and economic capacity increases. There is also economic and technological change, socio-cultural changes there. I want to highlight one thing. Whenever there is development, material part of culture and non-material part of culture, they are getting impacted. Usually what will happen is the material part of culture, the socio-economic, technological component, that changes fast. but the cultural part, the values, all these things do not change at equal pace, right? So with development, some parts of culture change at a very fast pace, the techno-economic component, but the cultural component doesn't change at equal pace. So there is what is called as cultural lag that also happens, and it leads to division of labor, specialization. Now, what is the meaning of this? If you look at our economy, different kind of tasks are being carried out, and different individuals are carrying out different tasks, and each individual is becoming specialized in that task. That is called specialization. Look at the economy, maybe 100 years back, 200 years back. The number of jobs in those economies will be limited. If you go back 500, 600 years back, most likely, predominantly, everywhere it will be agrarian economy. So same people are doing host of things, right? So they are participating in agricultural activities and they're doing multiple things related to agriculture. But look at the economies nowadays, urban economies, for example. Multiple people have different kind of things. Someone is a lawyer, someone is a doctor, someone is a teacher, someone is an engineer, and again within them also there are different kinds of specialization. It's not that all doctors are same. Someone is specializing in cardiology, someone is specializing in something else, nephrology, someone is specializing in urology. Among engineers also there are different kinds of specialization, mechanical, electrical, electronics, etc. So what I'm trying to say is, with development, you also have specialization. Right? Different people are becoming specialized in their areas, in their fields. Right? And development leads to various options so that people can fulfill their needs. But sometimes there can be harmful impacts of development as well. It can lead to, again, arms race, weapon development, all those things. So these are all the features of development. Social culture changes there, physical capability increases, technological capability increases, economic capability increases, it leads to specialization, host of things. But now the question is, why development causes conflict? Now, usually, as we already saw, development leads to change in land use. Development leads to creation, erection of different kinds of structures, right? In some place, a new building will be set up. In some place, a dam will be created, right? In some place, a thermal power plant will be created. In some place, you will create highways, right? So that happens. And it leads to the displacement of the original user. So wherever you are having development, whichever land you are having development, or whichever place you are having development, those who are the original inhabitants, they are negatively impacted. They might be asked to leave. Sometimes they might be forced to leave. They might not be given adequate compensation, right? So usually there is inconvenience for the original user, and sometimes it is done without their free will. Their role is not even taken. So they have been traditionally living in particular areas, but now there is a development project which is being proposed by the government, and they're forcefully affected. This leads to different kind of conflicts. Another reason why conflicts happen: there's a development project being proposed, government, the union government, state governments, okay, so they might come in some form of agreement with the original inhabitants, and once the project is over, the promises are not fulfilled, or whatever promise was there, half of that is filled, and remaining half is not fulfilled. It also leads to continuous conflicts, right? So development, since it causes these things, and usually there is inconvenience to the original user, it is one of those things which sparks different kind of conflicts, right? So this is something that I've already talked about, how the property rights are distributed. This gets impacted. Developmental projects, they limit access to common property resources. For example, let's say there are certain kind of common property resources. Let's say there is a lake. Now, this is a common property resource, right? So different communities might be dependent on this lake for their livelihood. Some of the fishermen community, right, they're dependent on the lake for their livelihood. But now all of a sudden, there's a development project being planned over there. Maybe a real estate project will come up over there. And this is what has happened in many of the urban areas in India, right? Lakes, wastelands, right? These are the places where real estate projects have been developed. So what will happen? This common property has now become a private property. So those communities which are dependent on this common property, they don't have access now. So their livelihood gets impacted. Look at the different hydroelectric projects, right? Different kinds of communities were dependent on these aquatic resources over there. But whenever these hydroelectric projects come up, the dams come up, so these people's, their livelihood gets impacted. Forests, another example. There have been different kinds of communities which have traditionally been dwelling in the forest. They have been staying in the forest. They depend on the forest for their livelihood. Again, forest can be a common property resource. But when you set up different kinds of projects over there, in some cases, it can become a private property. If, let's say, a mine is being constructed and the mining rights have been given to a private player. In some cases, the state takes up these kind of projects. Whatever be the case, the access to these projects is limited to the original inhabitants, right? It can now become an area of conflict. And in many instances, what happens? It is the state which is taking up these properties, right? And in that case, maybe they will not be even adequately compensated, right? And there have been many instances in India where these projects have come up. And in fact, we'll look at some of these projects in a while. So whatever adequate compensation was promised has not been given. It leads to different conflicts.